All right, we're back again. Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Live, and this is my second video for today, and I think this is going to be a lot. I woke up this morning and I did my original checks of news and things going on in the world today. And then I caught up on some things on my page to see who has said things, who has came to the page new, etc., etc. And immediately as I'm scrolling down, I noticed that my story, my testimony from the very top of my page had been completely deleted by Facebook, which really hurt me a little bit this morning. I had made that video as one of the first videos I have made here on Facebook, on this Beyond the Veil page. And it's what started this whole journey on this page. And figured since they deleted it, I'd share most of it with you again, so a lot of you new folks can really know what in the world it was like and how I got to where I am today. This morning, however, when I noticed the video was deleted and things like that, I didn't even put into account what today was. Today is September 5th. And today makes 6 years since I lost my baby boy. I don't know why today of all days they decided to do that. It seems as though they wanted to remind me of something, and that's perfectly fine with me. So I think I'm going to use what the enemy means for evil and turn it around for good, and show you that the Most High can use any situation in your life to turn you to Him rather than turn you away from Him. So I'm going to share with you guys a story that completely turned my life upside down. And I don't think I've shared this story in depth since the last time I shared that video, which was almost 3 years ago now. So it's going to be pretty hard for me, but I think it's something you need to hear. Okay, so here we go. As you know, right now, much of the East Coast, also Texas, and also Hawaii, is waiting and waiting for hurricanes to hit, as we have 3 hurricanes forming on all 3 sides of the United States right now. Same thing much of North Carolina, including myself, was doing September 4th and 5th of 2019, waiting on Hurricane Dorian. Well, I want to share with you what took place that night, and a little bit before then. See, my life has not been anywhere near perfect, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've done a whole lot of horrible things. And I've went down almost every broad road you can go down. And I've picked up a lot of things that you shouldn't. And I've done a lot of things that you shouldn't. And I've been in darkness. And I've been sitting in a bad spot. I guess that's where I need to start, is unpacking that stuff. You know, right after high school, I rebelled, as most teenagers do. Started picking up a lot of drugs, started picking up a lot of bad habits, and turned into a big old party animal, is what they call those people nowadays, and filled myself with a lot of world gluttony, as you can call it, and turned in every direction except for the right way. I did that for a long time, and I made a whole lot of mistakes in between. I I moved all over the place. I ended up joining the military. I was in the military for 3 years. I ended up having a med board out of there. Broke both my feet, messed up my knee, herniated a couple of discs in my back. I cracked my skull. I had about a 2.5-inch crack in the back of my skull, which caused me to have memory loss, anxiety, depression, sleep insomnia, restless leg syndrome, which actually came from nerve damage, and a whole lot of other stuff. I was having seizures quite often. I actually had 3 grand mal seizures in Germany, back to back to back, in only an 1.5-hour span. That completely fried my brain. I partially woke up in Longstuhl Hospital in Germany, and then they medevaced me from Longstuhl straight to Fort Bragg, where I spent my remainder of time in their med board hospital, trying to get my head back on straight and trying to get myself situated and put back together. And from there, the military had put me on, they love prescriptions. They had put me on about 16 pills a day. I was on Effexor, Remeron. I was on pregabalin, nerve pills, and a few other things mixed in between, along with things to help me sleep. All in one day, I'd take 16 pills a day. And that went on for a long time. I'd forget I had to use the bathroom on the way to the bathroom. I'd get up to do something, forget what I was doing, and it was horrible. I was living in a brain fog for a very long time. And that went on for a long time. I finally had my foot reconstructed and a brostrum put in that foot in 2016. And in the meantime, I ended up competing in the Paralympics for about 2 years, which is pretty awesome. I placed number 2 in the nation, and I placed number 2 in the nation in wheelchair basketball in 2016, I believe. No, 2016 or 17. I can't remember which year it was. I broke a world record racing wheelchairs in 2017. I competed in the Pentagon Games playing seated volleyball for the president, where we took gold as well. I don't even remember. I think it was like 12 gold medals and 5 or 6 silver medals, and I think a handful of bronze medals while I was in there, competing against teams all over the whole world, not just the United States, Australian, British. It didn't matter. It was incredible. Which is why you can actually Google my name, and if you type in Dustin Barr Warrior, just those three names in Google, you'll see a whole lot of craziness right at the top of the feed. And I did that for a while. It was incredible. I met some people that could do really incredible things with disabilities. And that's actually where I ended up starting my kind of journey to recovery, I guess you could call it. And after that was done, everything kind of went silent for a little bit. And in 2018, I decided to kind of I couldn't stand it anymore, taking medications all the time. So I made up my mind one night that I was done, and I quit taking all my medications cold turkey, which I do not recommend. It was horrible. I went through horrible withdrawals. I remember laying on the couch and telling my wife, I was like, look, if I die right now, just know it's going to be all right. Because you go through this shutdown when that stuff goes on. And that went on for a long time after I stopped all my medications. I really thought my body was just going to quit on me. And I finally got through that. And by 2019, I went from being addicted and taking all those medications from the military to picking up another habit, where I picked up pornography addiction. I picked up lying. I picked up a lot of horrible things in place of medications. And during that whole time too, I became a licensed tattoo artist, where I was doing tattoos for a long time too. And that has sends you down a broad road in itself. And that's the kind of life I was living. I'm doing a lot of bad. And I think all of it caught up with me one night. You know, the Bible speaks a lot about reaping and sowing seeds. Like, you whatever you sow is what you're going to reap. You reap what you sow type stuff. I had planted horrible seeds in my own life for a long time. And I think I finally reaped what I sowed. If you pay attention to the Bible, you'll see some things. That Yahushua was baptized at 30 years old and began his ministry at 30 years old. If you look back at the history and timelines, you also notice that most of the disciples were 30 years old when they started their ministry. Even if you look at the life of Saul and then the writings that followed with Paul, he was in his 30s when he had that transition in his life. And most of you people watching this, whether you want to admit it or not, went through a midlife crisis between 28 and 35 years old, whether you want to admit it or not. And I say that because I've talked to so many people all over the United States that had the exact same things happen to them around that same time. You know, there's a reason why the Bible says, I have called you out of darkness into that marvelous light, is what it says. And also, part of being born again is repenting. Part of being born again is humbling yourself and admitting you're a sinner. Part of being born again is doing a new thing with your life. So you can't do any of that as a baby, which is why the Roman Catholic Church doesn't baptizo you and completely submerge you from head to toe, but they sprinkle you as a baby, where you can't confess him before man, so he can confess you before his Father, where you can't acknowledge you're a sinner in need of a Savior, where you can't say that, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God, where you can't do any of those things, and where you're, as the New Testament says, you're a holy child. Remember, it says children are holy until that age of understanding. That's why it says your name's written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and then you're blotted out of the Lamb's Book of Life. See, children are considered holy, is what the word says. That's why the Roman Catholic Church has you saying, oh, well, I was sprinkled as a baby, so I'm good to go. Well, a seed is planted in darkness, in a hole in the ground, buried. See, I was buried in that hole, and it sucked. September 5th of 2019, we had Hurricane Dorian come and hit us. You know, it's crazy that this month that I shared with you guys that hurricanes are considered an angel in the whirlwind. That's either a sign or a trumpet or a sound spoken through a whirlwind to either bring judgment or bring peace. Well, I had the angel in the whirlwind bring judgment in my life on the coast of North Carolina in 2019. See, September 4th, I went to bed that night, mad at my wife over something stupid that I probably did. I went to bed watching pornography. I went to bed angry on my wrath and in sin. And I carried all the sin that I was carrying before that night. Same night that hurricane hit, I was doing those horrible things. And see, the way me and my wife were at that point, we were at a point where we'd sleep in 2 different rooms. She would sleep in one end of the house, and I'd sleep on the other end of the house. She'd be in there with the kids, and I'd be in another end of the house by myself in another bed. I went to bed that night, and we didn't lock up the lock up the door to the house. I went to bed completely unprepared. And that night, I don't know what time during the night when it was, but when the hurricane hit real hard, by the way, Dorian ended up causing over 200,000 some people to go without power. But that night, that hurricane not only opened our door to our house, but also blew the screen door in as well. Opened one door out and one door in. And that morning around 7:30, I woke up like I got punched in the stomach. See, I had this pattern that was kind of like a daily thing with my kids. I'd always wake up to hearing either Braden or Camden. They'd come running down the hallway, running across the living room, and then right into my room, boom, 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 and then bust in my door and either climb on the bed or tell me to come out there. And that morning I woke up because nothing happened. You know, you can feel things, right? Well, I woke up that morning and I felt like my whole stomach had fallen out of my butt. I sat up in bed, I could just hear everything howling outside, the rain hitting the metal roof and the wind just going nuts. And my son and nobody had come in the room to get me, no nothing, just complete eeriness in the house. I remember I opened my door and I walked across to the kids' room and I see Braden laying there asleep still, and I looked in Camden's bed and Camden was not in his bed. And see, you know those terrible twos? Well, technically it starts at like 18 or 17 months, I tell you, where they're just little knuckleheads venturing on all the time. Well, hey Grace, I'm gonna ask you if you could just listen. Apparently what had happened was the door that was left open is what drew my son's curiosity, and as he was probably making his way into my room is when he noticed the door open. He decided to go out on an adventure in the yard where he saw water falling from the sky and saw wind making cool noises. And my boy went out there in that yard, and it couldn't have been long at all. And this is what this is what got me so much, is I had to have been right behind him. Because when I noticed the door open after I saw that he was gone, I first of all, I screamed for Amy, and I ran outside, and we started looking around the backyard, and I was freaking out, screaming and hollering, Cam, where you at, Cam? And I remember I went over to my neighbor's house who we'd and stuff. He had like grapevines and stuff like that. And I went over there and I looked all in that dude's yard, all around his barn, around his barn, around his house, in his bushes, screaming, hollering, crying. And then it hit me. I was like, what about the cornfield across the road? You know, he could be in there somewhere. And I was running up and down rows of corn, just looking down, back and forth. And he wasn't there. So I ran back to the yard and I looked over to my other neighbor's yards who I really didn't get along too good with. And they had an underground pool. And their pool didn't have a closed gate. It didn't have anything around it. And I didn't even know my son knew the thing was over there. And I remember it was like a bag of bricks. I went and I ran and ran to the edge of that pool, and I looked in there, and there's my boy face down in that pool. I don't think that I even really, so quick. I jumped in that water and out the water in like a split second. I grabbed him and pulled him out like so fast and laid him on that concrete there. And, you know, I was in the military. I shared this with you guys. In the military, they teach you how to do CPR. They teach you how to do all that mess. And, you know, I never in my life thought that I'd have to do it on a baby. Not to mention my own baby. But I laid him down. And I still to this day think the thing that I didn't do right was I didn't tilt his head back. I laid him down and I pumped and I pumped and I pumped and I blew in and I pumped and I pumped and I pumped and I blew in and I pumped and I pumped and I pumped and I blew in, and you could hear him trying to breathe. But nothing would happen. And I remember while I was doing it, I scooped him up real quick and I held him against me and I ran and I ran. In the meantime, Amy had just came around the corner with me, and she just seeing her and seeing him, and just I couldn't breathe. Just wanted to die right then. I called the ambulance up there, and they sat there and they put the little oxygen thing on his mouth and they pumped and did what they needed to do, and the next thing you know, they're calling time. All of this was right in the middle of a hurricane. They had me and my wife and little Braden out there in our front yard of our house for, I want to say it was about 5 or 6 hours. Because anytime you have something like that happen in your property, they have to do the investigation, being it was a death. So I let them do whatever they needed to do in the house, and we all sat outside literally in the middle of the freaking hurricane. My wife snotty nose crying, me snotty nose crying, Braden's just as broken hearted as he could be, and there's just it's chaos. But see, while I was sitting there with Cam on the side of that pool, I screamed and I hollered at God. I went from not even acknowledge him in anything I did, in my ways and my actions and my words and my life, to blaming him, saying, "What are you doing? Please help. Give me back my boy. Give him back. Help, please, help." Why? I hated God that day. I didn't understand. I was so mad at him. I blamed him for everything. That day when the cops left, when the ambulance took off, taking him away, I felt like my whole life had been destroyed. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to do anything anymore. You know, my biggest fear even then was losing my kids. My biggest fear was something happening to them. And then it happened. That night, I told my wife, I said, I can't be in here. I don't want to be here anymore. I hate it here. And we didn't even spend one night in that house after my son died. We literally went that night. We just grabbed like 3 or 4 sets of clothes. And we went back to my mom's house at 30 years old. First time I've been back home since I don't even know when. It was forever. I remember when I got to my mama's, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to do nothing. I'd just sit in my room. And I'd have anxiety attack after anxiety attack of just seeing my boy face down over and over. Whenever I close my eyes, I see his face down in that pool over and over and over again. I hated it so much. I'd be driving down the road and I'd see it in my head and I'd almost wreck the car. It'd freak me out so bad. I'd wake up in the middle of the night just screaming, feeling it over and over. I hated God, I hated myself. I got to my mom's house and I think it was the second night. I remember I was standing up in the shower. I was in the shower and the way our shower's built, we got this kind of angled wall at the front, and I'm 6'7". I'd stand there and I propped my head up against the wall, and I cried and I cried and I cried in that shower. It was the first time. That was the first time since I lost my son that I prayed out loud. I told God, I said, look, whatever you're gonna do, you need to do it. I said, because I can't anymore. I told him, you took everything from me. I asked him questions. I said, please, please, why did you do this? Everybody else you bring back people all the time that don't even deserve life, and you want to take this little boy. How dare you? Got out of the shower and went back to the bed and stuff like that. And I remember I looked over at my nightstand, and this was my room I was in since I was a little kid. And my mom, she didn't change anything about my room for 20 years. She left everything the same. She didn't want that part of me to leave. Well, I looked over at my little nightstand, and there's all my church camp pictures and all my like little gathering stuff from high school and everything like that. And opened my drawer up, and there was this little itty bitty red NIV Bible. Little pocket Bibles, what they were. And the churches would kind of give it to you when you go to your graduation ceremony type things, or the church, whatever. They'd give you these little Bibles. And that's what that was. And I remember I made myself pick that thing up. And I didn't pick it up to read it because I was looking for something I was going to make me feel good. I picked up that thing to figure out why in the world he took my son. I figured out where my son is and why my son died and why these things happening to me. I think the first night I picked it up, I don't know how much I read. It was a lot. By the second day, I was already asking Amy questions about things she knew and what she knew, comparing it with things that I figured out and things I knew. And by the third night, I was already a big chunk into the Bible. I just couldn't stop. And I noticed that hatred I had starting to turn into this feeling of, I don't even know how to explain it. I was hooked. I'd always look forward to the next morning of figuring something else out. My son was buried September 11th. It took them 6 days to do all his biopsies and cutting him open and doing all that mess that they do. September 11th, I put my son in the ground. While everybody else is mourning a national day of remembrance for 9/11 in the world, there I was thinking about my son. I buried my son and everything went silent. I tell you guys all the time, I want you to remember this too. When you have somebody in your life who loses a loved one, remember the worst part's not right after the child dies. The burying part, all that stuff, that's shock. The worst part is when the churches stop bringing food, and when the churches stop visiting your home, when the churches stop caring after about 2 weeks. That 3rd week and 4th week and 5th week and 6th week and 7th week, that's the worst. When it's silent. I did, Cody. After he was dead and buried and gone, I couldn't stop reading the Bible. So much, in fact, that the week after he was buried, I had been talking every day with Mr. David Jones, which was my Sunday church pastor during that time. I've been talking to him often because he was made head pastor of my hometown church that I grew up in, and it was only literally like 3/4 a mile up the road, if that, maybe a mile up the road. And he says, well, if you ever need a place just to get away and this and that, he says, well, you can come up to the church. Cody, please stop distracting me and distracting other people is why. So what Mr. David said was, he said, if you want, you can come on up the road here and go to this church, go to my church and sit in there and just let it out. Just, do what you need to do. And a lot of people will hear that and be like, oh, okay, and won't do anything about it or nothing. And I took it as, well, look, man, it's silent right now. I don't really want to be here. My family just wants me to eat and go back to normal life, and I can't. And it's like, all right. And I made it a habit. I got up in the mornings and I would go up to the church. I'd walk in the church and I'd sit and I'd cry and I'd read and I'd cry and I'd read for 5-6 hours at a time. And by the 3rd or 4th day of me doing that, Mr. David Jones, he was in there one day, and because it was Wednesday night, by Wednesday night service, he was in there. But during the daytime, I went in his room and talked, and I ended up looking over in the corner, and he had this old blue guitar. And I asked me if I played, and I said, well, I used to, things like that. And he says, well, look, sometimes it's good to do this. He says, just play. He says, try and figure something out. And I grabbed that guitar, and I got hooked on that along with reading. I guess it's kind of like that whole David Morning type thing, and his songs that he would write. In 1 week, I think it was 5 songs I had written. By the 2nd week, I was playing and singing those songs to the church. I think every single day I'd sit in that church, I'd hook up the speakers, I'd pray and sing, I'd cry, I'd play, just me by myself in that church building. Every day I was in that temple, playing and singing and crying, and playing and singing and reading and crying and reading and crying and singing and thanking God at the same time somehow. By the second and third month, I had gotten so hooked on the Bible that I had gone every bit of 3/4 of the way through the Bible in only that short amount of time, and I'm not kidding. And not only that, I had completely went from hating God so much to falling so in love with Him, telling Him I'm so sorry, and begging Him to forgive me. Every day, I'd find something I needed to work on, or something I needed to change, or something that I had done wrong. And I went from blaming God for everything to blaming myself even more, because I just felt so unworthy to be even talking to Him. I felt so unworthy to be able to sing and praise and even breathe after the things I looked at I did wrong in my life that I didn't even realize I was doing. I felt like trash. As Paul said, I felt wretched from head to toe. I went back and I started apologizing for things I did as I was a kid. I started apologizing for things I had done all the way back to my early little childhood. Just little things that I know most people won't even think about anymore. I felt horrible about it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated looking back. So I remember this was like month 4 or 5, and COVID hit, by the way, in January to March, only a couple of months after I lost my son. And by then, I was already so in love with God, I wasn't even paying attention to COVID. But I remember one night I had made up my mind. Hush. I had made up my mind that I was going to do things differently. And I told God, I said, please, Father. I said, whatever I do, I want you to do it for me. And whenever I speak, I need you to speak for me. Whenever I walk, I want you to lead me. So whenever I breathe, I don't want to take that breath. I want it to be you. I want my life to represent what you want it to represent, and I want to stop messing it up. I remember I first got hooked on that line, and by this time I was already well into the New Testament. And I got hooked on that line that said word for word. You know, they will capture you for 10 days, and He will allow you to share your testimony, and He will give you a voice that speaks in a way in which the enemy cannot refute. And I was hooked on it. I said, my goodness, I want that so bad. I said, Father, please, I want that right there. I said, give me that voice that speaks in a way in which that enemy cannot refute anymore. Let me tell him he's wrong in every way I can. Please. I started getting really bold. I felt like there was just so much I wanted to share with people. Anytime I'd read something new in the Bible,
I want to tell Amy. I want to tell my mom. I want to tell my uncles. I want to tell my grandma. And they thought I was going crazy. So I was spending all this time with my face in books. Spending all this time reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. But I couldn't help it. It's all I wanted to do. Every day, all day, I just wanted to read. I wanted to read. And then when I won't read, I was writing. And then when I was done writing, I'd sing what I wrote. Every day. It's a whole day, every day. To the point my mom had to literally tell me, like I was a teenager all over again, you need to eat, son, you need to eat. And I was already full off of this bread. And it wasn't just me. My wife was there the whole time, falling in love too, and not with me. I don't even feel worthy to have her half the time. She was falling in love with God with me. I told her all the time, I said, please love God more than you love me. Love God more than you love me. You know. Next thing you know, by the time summertime hit after COVID, I remember I was up listening to Billy Graham, who I listened to all the time, and this is before I found out about Zionism, and this is before I found out about Freemasonry, and this is before I found out about a lot of things. I was just listening to what I could. I memorized probably, and I say this a lot, and I don't think you guys really get it, but I memorized probably 90% of Billy Graham's sermons from the Billy Graham's classics, to the point where I'd be out in the yard doing something, and I'd have Billy Graham classics blasting over the speaker so the neighbors could even hear it. From our archives, the Billy Graham Classics presents. And I knew what sermon it was from the first couple of words. I fell in love with hearing the Word of God and hearing people preach the Word of God every day. It's all I wanted to do. In the meantime, the world was freaking out about COVID. And at this point, we had really began our 6-foot distance mess and masked really heavy. Schools were shut down. Everybody was homeschooling. And they had closed the baseball field and stuff around my hometown because they weren't even allowing that at this point. And I was up one night listening to Billy Graham. And this one was about the Great Awakening, is what Billy Graham was talking about. And how he was talking about this coming Great Awakening and revival. And coming out of darkness into light. And all these things that I was just hooked on already. And revival during the chaos. But he wasn't talking about preaching revival. He was talking about the revival happening in man. And I think it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock that night that I started listening to that one. And I was in the living room, and my wife was in there putting my son Braden to sleep. Because he always had to have one of us lay down with him every night after my son died. I never want to be alone. To this very day in this RV, I haven't slept in a bed, like a bed, like a regular bed in, I don't know how long now. Every night in this RV here, what I sleep on every night is the table and my RV I have here. It collapses to 2 benches. You take the cushions off of the benches and it turns into like a twin size mattress that's about 5 foot 11 inches long, and I'm 6'7", by the way. Well, I take all 4 of those mattresses and I put them to those 4 of those pads, and I put them together and I wrap a sheet around it. And I still, to this very day, I don't sleep in the bed with my wife at night. She has the bed with the baby, and I sleep in the living room with my son Braden, who's 10 years old now. I still put that little 4-piece pillow together on the floor beside him every night. It's where I sleep, on the floor beside my boy. I told him I'll do it to the day I die if I have to. Anyway, that night, she was the one in there, and she was putting in the bed, and I was out there getting wound up in the living room, listening to old Billy. And I ended up pausing the video, and I went in there and flipped the light on with Amy and Braden in bed. And I told Amy, I said, Amy, I have to tell you something. She looked at me like I was nuts, because I'm telling you, I was really, when I tell you guys I was hooked on this stuff at this point, as far as the Bible and reading and listening to the Bible every day, I was. I told her, I said, Amy, I'm going to do something crazy tomorrow. She was like, oh no, what? I said, Amy, I want to preach, and I want to preach a revival. I don't want to preach in the church right away. I said, I want to preach a revival. She said, Dustin, just go to bed. And I said, I mean it, Amy, I really am. I said, I'm going to do this. She said, okay. And I kissed her and prayed, and I went back in the living room. I hit play. You know, she thought I was being funny. And I told myself right then, I said, I'm going to do this. And I said, if I wake up in the morning and I still feel this same way, I'm going to do it. And it took me forever to go to sleep that night. I laid there and I tossed and turned. I was so excited just about everything. And this was only a couple of months after I lost my son. I was so excited about everything God had done in my life in that little bit of time. I was so excited about all the things that I had learned and grown and developed into. By the time I went to sleep, I was like, please hurry up and wake me up. I don't even think I dreamed that night. I think it was one of those just, whatever, it's over. I woke up that morning at like 6:30, 7 o'clock, and immediately it never went away. I said, oh yes, I'm gonna do it. My wife was still sleeping. Braden was still sleeping. And by 7:30, I had made up my mind what I was gonna do. And being that we had COVID protocols, I had to figure out where I was gonna do it and how I was gonna do it. 7:45 came, and see, we live in a real small town. All we have is a Dollar General, a baseball field, a high school, elementary school, and literally a Dollar General, a stoplight, and our school system stuff. And sports are everything in our town. It was all we had was baseball, football, basketball, softball, volleyball. It was just all our town had to look forward to. So I knew people would see, if they see something going on that baseball field, they'll all be out there. And I sat there, and the first thing I had to do was figure out how I could get approved to go out to the baseball field. So I called the manager of the park, which turned out to be my gym teacher and baseball and basketball teacher from high school, who I swore hated me because of how bad I was in high school. I swear, I really thought that he hated me for a long time. So for him to hear this on a phone call, he probably was wanting to laugh more than anything. But I called him and I said, hey, Coach Ainge, it's Dustin Barr, how you doing? He said, Dustin? I said, yes, sir. I said, I gotta ask you a question. It's gonna sound real crazy. I said, do you mind if I use your baseball park to preach next week? Do you mind if I use your baseball park to preach next week? I have a lot of things I want to tell people. And, he sat there for a second and he said, well, son, sure, yeah. He said, we can make that happen. He says, but you're going to have to call the sheriff's department and make sure they're okay with their COVID protocols. And I said, thank you so much, Coach. And I hung on that phone. And I called the sheriff's department, which my brother works for. My twin brother, Justin. I'm Dustin, he's Justin. My twin brother, Justin, he's a deputy. He works for the K9 unit and stuff like that. I called his sheriff, and I talked to him, and I said, hey, I need to know if it would be okay if I hosted a revival and I had you guys kind of look over it however you need to do it for COVID. He says, well, we don't have to look over it. He says, as long as you have the cars even parked 6 foot apart and you don't have people gathered in huddles, you have them in their cars. He says, that's perfectly fine. And he says, and I'll have 2 deputies out there to help you. And I was like, okay, that's fabulous. So I hung up the phone with him. And this was only by like 8:15, if that morning. And by 8:30, my wife and them were still asleep. By 8:30, I got on my Facebook, and this is the first time I really started getting into Facebook stuff. By 8:30, I went and made my first, I guess you call it like a flyer or meme type thing. And I made one that said, the Great Awakening of 2020, open your eyes. And I typed in the dates for 1 week from that day, which was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the following week, which gave me 7 days to prepare for it. And I posted it. And my whole hometown knew me as this crazy, bad party animal guy for a long time that would host parties and do these crazy things and tattooing and all that other mess. And then they see me up there posting about a revival after losing my son, so they thought I was completely nuts. And so I know a lot of these shares didn't have nothing to do with love, but in a matter of like 15 minutes, that flyer I made got shared around probably 45 to 50 times. And it's the first time anybody even acknowledged me really on Facebook, but it got shared every freaking where you can imagine. It blew my mind. And Amy finally woke up about 9 o'clock. And I said, Amy, you won't guess what I did this morning. She was like, oh no. And I told her everything. And I don't know if she thought I was crazy or if she was excited or what, but she was there for me. And she said, well, Dustin, you've never done this before. You've never done nothing like this before. She says, do you know what you're doing and this and that? And I said, yeah. I said, I know the word inside and out. And I know what he's done for me. And I have to tell everybody. So, I shared it. It got shared all around. There's a lot of people finding out about this revival. And that week went by so fast. I remember that day it hit me like a bag of bricks. By like lunchtime, I was like, what have I done? What am I going to do? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? I don't know how to do this. And I got out a black binder and filled it up with some notebook paper. And I started just writing out sermon ideas and sermon thoughts, kind of mixing in different things, and I just overdid it really. Each night I had prepared this huge, just bulky mess of things I was going to say. First night was on Jonah and how he ran from his calling 2,500 miles in the opposite direction before he got swallowed and spit back out in the right direction, and how I directed that straight to my life and my testimony to people for the first time is I was like Jonah. And I had planned all kinds of things that were my thoughts. Like, Proverbs 3:5 says to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And I was just solely at first just depending on my own understanding of the word. And anyway, that week went by and I had chaos happen. I had like 2 flat tires, a whole lot of crazy bad stuff happened, trying to discourage me from it. But the day of the revival came, and Mr. David Jones, that preacher I was telling you about, he said that I can use his PA system. He said I could take both the big main speakers and the sound box board and microphone. And he says I could use those things for the 3 days as long as I took care of them. And I remember I took everything out there and set it up 3 hours before my appointed time, which I told people was going to be 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But I was so excited I couldn't wait. I went out there 3 hours beforehand and set everything up and just started blasting Christian music all over the speakers so the whole town could hear it. So they'd be like, what's this guy doing out there sitting on a box playing this music out loud for in the middle of a baseball field by himself? And not to mention this, where I was doing my first preaching and teaching and stuff at the ball field was right across the road from the cemetery my son was buried in, which made me even more inspired to speak and preach and teach because I felt like he was right there in the crowd. And I sat out there for 3 hours just like so pumped up, so excited, so wound up. And about 5:30 came, 30 minutes before, and I had my first car pull in. And they pulled in and they were like, is this where that were? Because I had put signs up on every road in my small town that you could find. I'd put these big old neon green signs up saying revival, open your eyes, this way, ball field, that this time and stuff like that. I had my first car show up at 5:30. And then I had 4 more after that, then 10 more after that, and 20 more after that. And the first night by 6 o'clock, I had 80 cars that were parked out there in that parking lot. And it overwhelmed me. It scared me. It scared me to death. It scared me to death. I was so scared. I went from being so excited and so pumped up to just terrified. I'd see people that would pick on me my whole life as a kid, and I'd watch families that would look at me like I was the worst piece of trash in the world pulling into this parking lot just so they could have something to laugh at, is what I thought. But I think it was about 5 minutes to 6 and the whole parking lot was just so full. And I was up there by the microphone, and I know a lot of them probably thought that I had just cracked, because I set the mic down and I took off to the dugout that was behind the stage and stuff like that. I just left the mic up there. I left everything up there, and I just walked away and walked into a dugout by myself with all those cars sitting out there. And I sat down in that dugout that I used to sit in as a little teenager. And I said, God, this is it. I said, please. I said, please. Remember that time I told you to please speak through me? And please use me? I need it now. I need it right now. I need that voice right now. Please. Give me that voice that speaks in a way in which the enemy cannot refute. Right now, please. I'm going to trust you. And right then, right there, oh man, I still feel it every time when I'm about to talk to you guys. I have this feeling come over me of just everything I needed. I knew exactly what I was going to say. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I walked out of that dugout, and I walked up to my it's a music stand. It's really a music stand. I used to just sit my words up that I'd write songs to for my guitar, is what I used as my podium type thing. And I had my big black notebook already open to the page I was going to start on and stuff. And I go up to the podium, and everybody's looking at me just waiting, like, what's this dude going to do? And I closed that binder, and I set it on the floor beside me. I set it right down on the ground beside me. And I started telling them everything. Everything. All the scriptures I had studied came right to mind. All the scriptures I had learned came right to my mind. Numbers, chapters, pages even. I knew everything I was going to say. It all came right out like, I don't know how to explain it. It was just incredible. And I stood up there for an hour and a half just preaching and preaching and preaching and preaching. And I'd watch people. They'd pull into Dollar General across the road and they'd hear that PA system echoing across. And I'd watch people sitting on the back of their tailgates at the Dollar General parking lot listening and listening and listening. And I'd look over at the cemetery and I'd see people out there that would walk around the cemetery like a track. They'd stop by the side of the road and they would just listen and listen and listen. And I talked until the sun went down. Until they couldn't see me anymore. Until all I saw was headlights shining in my face. And by the time I was done and closed, they all started blowing their horns. All of them. Kind of their way of clapping, I guess. And I broke down. It was incredible. I was hooked. And so they all leave that night. And by the second day, because it was supposed to be a 3-day revival, by the second day I did the same thing. I showed up 3 hours early. And I showed up 3 hours early and played my music across so everybody could hear it. And people started pouring in about 5:15, 5:30. Cars started coming in, and I think I counted over 120 cars there the next night, which blew my mind. Fascinated me. And I stood up there. I didn't even bring my notebook, I don't think, that night. And I preached and preached and preached until the sun went down. They blew their horns. A lot of them got out of their cars and came up there and hugged my neck. And they all left. And I remember when I went home that night, I told Amy, I said, I don't ever want to stop. I said, I never want to stop doing this. This is all I want. Lacey Gardner is up here right now. You guys want to know something fascinating about Lacey? She sang the second night of my revival. She's the one I brought up there to sing to everybody before it started. And here she is on this page right now listening. That's pretty incredible. Love you, Lacey. Let me keep going. Third night of the revival happened. And, whew. The third night happened. Okay. Got out there early. I set up the speakers, had music blasting all over the place. And we had so many cars show up again. It was wild. I preached and I preached and I preached and I preached till I couldn't no more. And this night, what's incredible is Lacey's mama. It's Donna Gardner, which is incredible. This is happening right now. It's Donna Gardner, Lacey's mama. She came up to get baptized that night. And it meant everything to me. I tell everybody all the time that Miss Donna was some of my first fruit I produced for the kingdom. But I think what really got me the most was this. When everything was over and everybody was leaving, I had this tiny little Chinese lady pull her little Honda car up to the stand. She called me up to her window. And she says, "You come back tomorrow night too?" I said, "No, ma'am, it was just tonight." I said, "This was it. This was the third night." And she says, "I know." She said, "But you come back tomorrow night too, please." I said, "Ma'am, I can't. I'm sorry." And what she told me next changed my whole life. The first night of the revival, this little Chinese lady was one of the people that was in the Dollar General parking lot that was passing through town. And as she was passing through town, she stopped at the Dollar General and she heard me preaching across the road. And she said she sat in the parking lot the whole first night. And she loved it so much that she went and got a hotel in Williamston, which is the town beside of mine. She got a hotel just to come back the second night. And she listened. And then she went and got a hotel again just to come back the third night. It turns out she was from like a couple of hours away. And all she wanted to do was stick around and hear the Word of God. And it set me on fire. I hugged that little lady's neck. And I remember I prayed with her and she left. And I'm sure somewhere today she's sharing the gospel somewhere. But that next day, I remember the silence killed me. I was like, well, now what do I do? Nothing's happening. I said, what do I do now? And I had like 2 other churches calling me to ask me if I wanted to be a youth minister and a youth pastor. And they said that if I decide to, they said they'd help me with getting into Bible college, doing all that stuff. And I was hooked. I was like, sure. I had one church that had a whole lot of kids in their youth group at first. And they asked me first, and the pay would have been great, and the kids, they would have had so many kids. I would have had so many kids. It would have been awesome. And it was a huge church. But this other church called me, and they only had 12 in their youth group. And they were a real small town church. And they didn't really have much of anything. And I prayed and I asked God what he wanted me to do. And he put it hard on my heart to choose the lesser and to help them build. So I chose the church with only 12 kids, with hardly any pay. And I went there. And that's where I was during my first years in college, was there as a youth pastor. And in a matter of 2 years, 12 turned into 56. Including their parents they'd leave adult church to come over to hear youth church. And it was fascinating. Those kids were on fire. And you guys have heard much of the story from this point. I went from being there to an ordained pastor at Trenner's Creek Church of Christ, to having my own church, to finding out that a whole lot of bad stuff had been happening in the background of not just that church, but just churches in general. I found out about Freemasonry. I found out about what it means to be a 501c3. I found out about what Constantine had done. Found out about what a steeple is. Found out what the Word says about those things. Found out about the church of the short season, where the blind guides lead the blind. I found out what apostasy was and paganism was, and I found out all around me. And that's when I started telling the kids. I was like, look, here, Mom, Santa Claus ain't real, and this ain't it, and this is that. Look, it is what it is. Y'all need to hear the truth. So much, in fact, that when Halloween came and all the elders and deacons and parents wanted to do Harvest Festival, all me and the kids wanted to do was dress up as Adam and Eve and John the Baptist, dressed up as John, and people from the Bible. And then we completely took it off the table. See, the parents didn't like that. I ended up getting kicked out of that church as a Dean's List student in college, all because I wanted to go do mission work in India. And the other church it was bad. It was bad. I caught the college itself. It was completely ran by Freemasons. That's where my page started. Found out about a lot of stuff happening in the backgrounds that nobody else will tell you. That's why I got in love with teaching and preaching every day of my life. Serving every day of my life. Longing for righteousness, longing for the kingdom, longing for Him every day of my life. No in between. And I got hooked. I fell in love with God every day of my life, all over again. People would tell you that I've been following this page for a long time. I've had to correct myself so many times, and each time has been fascinating to me. It hadn't been really like bad or hard or scary. It's just been, hey, look, this is this now. Hey, look, this is something new. And you guys grow and learn with me. Don't be scared to learn. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Study yourself as one approved and equipped to handle the Word of God. Test everything around you. Know people by their fruits and know what fruits are. Produce fruits. He who's not producing fruit will be cut off and tossed in bundles into the fire. Learn the truth. And most importantly, don't wait to lose someone that you love so much to fall in love with God. My whole ministry started because of that. To warn people before they get in the situation I was in. To wake people up before they get woken up. There's a door that's open for you, and it's up to you to walk through it. He's not going to drag you through it. I had to pick up that Bible first. I had to want to know the truth. I had to want to learn. I had to want to grow. I had to want to repent. I had to want to do better every day of my life. I had to tell myself over and over again, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. And now you know where I came from and why I am where I am today. None of this is for my glory, but all for the one who called me out of that dark hole I was in and into that light that I found. Everything that I have done since the death of my son has been to give back to him everything he gave to me. And I can't do enough. I will never do enough. And that's why I give it all I got. I know it's hard. And I know it hurts. And it's not easy. He says you will be persecuted. You will be hated. He says your own mom and your hometown and everyone will turn against you. He says they will hate you for the truth. Because the truth is not within them. It's okay to feel alone. If you read Timothy, he says, blessed are those who are content with just being with him. You're never truly alone when you're with him. Some of my favorite times with him has been broken moments like these. Some of my favorite moments with him have been in these dark places where he's pulling me back out, correcting me. Ecclesiasticus and Ecclesiastes and wisdom all talk about wisdom changed with discipline. He who fears discipline fears wisdom. For the fear of the Lord. All right, it seemed it tried to kick me off there. You didn't miss anything. The fear of the Lord is the root of wisdom, and its branches have long life. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's okay. In order to be refined, you have to be in a refinery. Just know he's right there with it. And if he brought you to it, he indeed will bring you through it. Just wanted you guys to know that I've came from the same places you've been. And I've made many of the same mistakes that you've made, and then some. I am no better than any of you. As a matter of fact, I see myself as wretched constantly, and the only sense of righteousness that lives in me is him and what he can do through me. I feel like I was a tool for the devil my whole life, and that's why now I want to be a hand and a foot for the Father my whole life. He wants to do a new thing in your life too. And it's up to you to repent and do better. And it's up to you to seek after righteousness. It's after you to seek after the things of the kingdom. And it all comes down to serving. I fell in love with speaking. I fell in love with talking about God. What do you spend most of your time doing? Because it can be changed if you allow it to be. I tell people all the time in comments, I say, you make your own priorities. Some people want my videos to be short and sweet. You know, like a Sunday service. My thing is I don't know how in the world they even do that anymore. What can you teach in 20 minutes? And truly teach it. Anyway, I'm going to get off of here and go spend some time with my wife because I know she's having a hard time today too. But please know that our hard time is not wanting our son back. Our hard time isn't saying, oh, I wish it never happened. Our hard time is this. We don't want no one else to go through what we had to go through. Because we've watched people that have been in the same situation, and instead of turning to God, they turn away from him. And that's why he tells you there's a point in your life where there's going to be two roads in front of you. There's the broad road where you can turn away. Or there's going to be the narrow way in which you can turn to him. Which way are you going to pick? Anyway, I love you guys. I appreciate the time you guys have spent with me tonight. I thank you for all your prayers and thoughts and things like that today. Go be a hand and a foot today. And I promise you, it'll be so worth it. Have a good night and or day wherever you are in the world today. And I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye from beyond the veil.